It's Friday, the 16th of January 2026, and this is the Hot Topics podcast. Welcome to the Hot Topics podcast from NB Medical with me, Neal Tucker, as always. I hope you had a good festive period, but New Year's is but a distant memory. It is firmly back down to business. So too with the Hot Topics podcast. Today, 3 new papers for us to have a think about. Firstly, hitting the headlines last week, weight regain after cessation of GLP1 drugs. That's in the BMJ. Then we're off to the Lancet to look at a sort of related paper on Orforglipron, new weight loss GLP1 receptor agonist that you can take as a pill. And then we're back to the BMJ for a quick one to finish on oral Ivermectin versus Permethrin cream for treating classic scabies. Can we? Should we? Now, I hope you've been feeling well over the festive period. I've been remarkably well for a long time. And in fact, me and my wife had just been being a bit smug about it just last week. Then, lo and behold, guess what happens? I've just come down with something. So hopefully you won't get just a load of snot coming through on this podcast. I'm actually trying to practice what I preach. I've been off to get myself some saline nasal spray to see if I can get this better as fast as possible. Disappointingly, having talked on the Hot Topics course about the role of nasal sprays for improving resolution of upper respiratory tract infections last year, we talked about Sterinase in particular, that's saline nasal spray. I can't seem to get it anywhere. So instead I've gone for Sterimar spray. It's not strictly protocol for our evidence-based medicine podcast, but it'll have to do. It's all just salty water, right? Well, in fact, this is actual seawater, which, knowing the nearest sea around me at Southampton, doesn't sound that appealing. The packet tells me that it is natural micro-diffused seawater, whatever that means, and has trace elements and marine minerals. What on earth are they? I have no idea. Is it krill poo? I don't know, but I'm still sticking it up my nose. After this, I'm going deep on the kimchi and sauerkraut because New Scientist over Christmas tells me that I can pimp my immune system by eating at least 3 portions of fermented food in one day. Things are going to get whiffy in the Tucker household in more ways than one. Thankfully, you won't have to be able to smell that through the medium of podcasting, so you are safe for now at least. Enough about me, on to NB Medical news. What's 2026 got in store for us and for you? Well, we've got another face-to-face course coming up. That's going to be on Friday, the 6th of March in London. Check out the website for details. We're still doing face-to-face courses in your local area. Of course, if you want to commission us to do one, I've got a couple coming up next week. They're always great fun. Just contact the office if this is of interest. And of course, we've got loads of our live webinars coming up with our Hot Topics course next week, Lifestyle Medicine the Friday after. And from early March, we've got our new Hot Topics course, which we're just finished writing right now. And then we'll have all of our other courses as well following that. Don't forget, sign up to MB Plus and you can come on all of them for just over £300 per year. Now, okay, enough about that. On to the medicine. First paper today is in the BMJ, titled Weight Regain After Cessation of Medication for Weight Management, Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. This is, in fact, 3 papers. We get the actual research paper, then we get an opinion piece from the key authors and an editorial as well. And what's interesting is not so much the findings that people regain weight when they stop weight loss drugs. This you and I already knew from the individual papers, even if perhaps, just perhaps, the public don't appreciate that fact as much. But what's fascinating is that these 3 papers don't necessarily agree on some of the key issues that the paper highlights. So super topical then. By some estimates, there are now 2.5 million people in the UK using injectable incretin-based treatments for weight loss, largely through the private system, of course. This paper will be of great interest to them. Now, it's not a new randomized controlled trial. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis, including 37 different studies using any drug intervention currently or previously licensed for weight loss, including semaglutide, tirzepatide, but also drugs like liraglutide, exenatide, orlistat, topiramate, and a bunch of other drugs that I've never heard of before. 63 different intervention arms, 9,000 plus participants worth of data that they're trying to pull together some meaningful results on. The main outcome measure was rate of weight regain from end of treatment, and then they looked at changes in cardiometabolic markers as secondary outcomes. The comparator here is data from behavioral weight management programs, or BWMPs, or perhaps BWMPs, if you might want to call them that. I'm not sure if that's what they use in nutrition circles. I don't know. And then they broadly looked at 3 active arms. So all medication, then all incretin mimetics, and then just the newer incretin mimetics, specifically semaglutide and tirzepatide. In reality, it's only that last group that anybody cares about. So all arms had an initial intervention period. That's the weight loss phase. This shows that, unsurprisingly, the newer incretin mimetics had the greatest weight loss during that time. 15 kilos loss of body weight from baseline on average. I'm not even going to talk about the other medication groups because, let's be honest, they're dead in the water right now. The behavioral weight management programs only achieved 5 kilos average weight loss, although, if I'm honest again, it surprised me that it was actually that good. Now, the result that hit the headlines in the popular press last week was that by 1.7 years after cessation of weight loss drugs, on average, all of the weight that had been lost is regained. What the papers didn't really explain was that this figure is reached by a modelling study. So almost all of the trials where they're following up their patients after they've finished their treatment stop at the 1 year mark. So they've got decent data up to then on quite a large number of patients that allow them to work out the trajectory of weight regain. And then they've extrapolated that if you keep on following that same trajectory, that you'll regain all of your weight by 1.7 years. I think it's an important finding. I think that it's realistically a legitimate finding as well, but we might just want to bear in mind the limitations of the data. And we've talked about modelling studies on the podcast before and how the results that they give, you can't have quite the same confidence in them as you would do in a study where you've actually got real measurements in real people. Only one very small study in women with PCOS using semaglutide had 2 years of follow-up after cessation, and they were all on metformin, and actually they did better in that study at maintaining that weight loss than perhaps this headline result has suggested. So on the one hand, we've got a result that everyone expected, and on the other hand, we have to take it with that little bit of pinch of salt as it's based on some assumptions, even if they are highly plausible. Any other points of note from the study? Well, the more weight you lose to start, the faster you gain it back when you stop treatment. And in fact, the significant weight loss that was seen with the new injectable weight loss medications led to 4 times faster weight regain than weight loss through non-drug programs. In fact, at the year mark, the weight loss that was maintained through a behavioral weight management program was the same as for the new injectables. And after that year, actually, it became better. They were losing or regaining that weight much, much slower. You might think then that behavioral support after stopping weight loss medications might be advantageous, but the authors commented that they found no evidence that the intensity of behavioral support provided during treatment impacted the rate of weight regain after treatment. You can believe you're going to do all the HIIT classes in the world to keep that weight off, but it probably isn't going to happen, and you're probably going to regain that weight anyway. Another point was that those cardiometabolic markers all went back to what they were before the treatment within 1.4 years of stopping medication. This, the authors point out, is at odds with data that suggests benefits of cardiometabolic health for up to 5 years at the end of behavioural weight management programs, calling into question just whether actually for long-term health, when we're thinking about more than just weight loss itself, perhaps those behavioural weight management programs could be better. The authors conclude with weight management medications are associated with a reduction in weight and improvement in cardiometabolic health that are attenuated soon after treatment ends, with no evidence of benefit 1.7 years after the cessation of treatment. This evidence cautions against short-term use of weight management medications, emphasizes the need for further research into cost-effective strategies for long-term weight control, and reinforces the importance of primary prevention. The editorial comments, the results are not surprising, and then warns that people need to be aware of the consequences of cessation of these medications. It counsels on the need to do the basics, healthy diet, other lifestyle measures, not just as a mechanism to manage weight, but for more general health benefits overall. The linked opinion article is also very interesting because it starts with the comment, the obvious solution is to continue treatment. And of course, that is what most of the manufacturers have been advocating for, even though we don't actually have the data that shows that you continue to maintain or continue to lose weight indefinitely on these medications, because we don't have the data for that long. I think we do have it up for sort of 4 years or so, which is promising, but beyond that is less certain. The editorial points out that this, of course, is normal practice for the management of other cardiometabolic risk factors. However, it notes that half of people will stop these treatments because of side effects, because of the high costs, because of weight plateau. All of these are factors. It notes that 90% of people in the UK using these medications are self-funding. It provides then some numbers on cost effectiveness, and it shows that based on a return to normal weight by around 1.5 years, the current model for semaglutide, at least on the NHS, wouldn't meet NICE funding thresholds, which makes you wonder then if the current NHS England 12-year rollout will actually ever happen. It may well have to if they've made some pact with the devil, but you and I will see. The biggest concern about all of this, perhaps, is that weight regain may lead to yo-yo treatment. And this could have a very negative consequence for patients. Another BMJ editorial earlier in the year, this was published in August, reports that almost 40% of weight loss may be in lean muscle mass, potentially leading to sarcopenia. People won't put back on the muscle as fast as they can put back on the fat after cessation. And if they then go and have multiple rounds of treatment, they might be in a terrible position where they keep on eroding their lean muscle mass. This is one of the reasons why coming on and off treatment may not be great, but also why it's really important that people do exercise whilst they're losing weight on these drugs. And one of my big concerns about the whole use of the online private prescribing system and all these companies that are selling people semaglutide and tirzepatide over the internet, apart from the issues around self-reporting weight and BMI and the risk of abuse, which of course is another area of concern, I'm just not sure that a lot of these companies are really prescribing in line with the licensing conditions, where the medications are meant to be used in conjunction with dietary measures. The drug will make you stop eating, but some effort is going to be needed to make sure that you don't then become deficient in certain vital nutrients. And you're meant to use them along with increased physical exercise, which is crucial if you're going to stand a chance of maintaining that muscle mass. But I don't think most of these companies do almost anything to address this. The better companies, of course, are at least informing GP practices that they've prescribed something to one of our patients. But I just don't really understand, when did it happen that anyone could sell anyone a prescription-only medication on the internet? I don't know, the system feels a little bit broken here. Anyway, having seen firsthand the success of weight loss in friends and patients with these medications, it feels harsh to be too negative about it. But clearly, as these papers highlight, there are still some serious questions about how to manage this best in the long term. Which brings us on to our second paper. So continuing the theme of incretin mimetics, this Lancet paper is a phase 3 double-blind randomized controlled trial comparing the new kid on the block, Orforglipron, which is also a GLP1 receptor agonist, to placebo for weight loss in obesity associated with type 2 diabetes. Now, we have already had some data published on Orforglipron already. So that was for obesity management in people without type 2 diabetes, and that was in the New England Journal of Medicine in September. I must have had some better things to talk about at the time. What's exciting about this medication is that, firstly, of course, it's oral, which many people will prefer. But that alone doesn't really set it apart now, because you can get semaglutide in an oral form, even if it isn't licensed for obesity management in the UK for that indication currently. But give it time, it's going to come. What's really exciting is how it's different to semaglutide. So the latter is a large molecule drug, which means it's not easily absorbed through the gut. It requires an adjunct substance called salcaprosate sodium to neutralize gastric acid and, in the words of new scientists, fluidizes the cell membranes to allow the big molecule to make it through the gut wall. This means it's more complex to make, it's more expensive, and has restrictions on when you can eat. So you have to take it at least 8 hours after eating. Otherwise, all your food can seep across the cell wall too or something. I've had no idea what that's going to do to you. It sounds a bit like if you blended up a McDonald's Happy Meal and stuck it down a TPN line. Anyway, the beauty of Orforglipron is that it's a small molecule. It gets easily absorbed, therefore, making it cheaper to make and easier to take. The manufacturers, Eli Lilly, they're the people who make tirzepatide, have apparently indicated that it will be cheaper than existing treatments. Perhaps then this will make it become more attractive to the UK public, who are still having to put their hands in their wallets to access these medications. But is it any good? Well, the paper in September has a positive result. The highest dose of Orforglipron, which is 36 milligrams daily, led to a 11% mean weight loss by 72 weeks versus 2% on the placebo. So good, although perhaps not as potent as the injectables. What about for people who also have type 2 diabetes? So first, the methodology. If you've listened to the podcast over the past couple of years, we've talked about semaglutide and tirzepatide. This study will be very familiar territory for you. Conducted over 72 weeks with participants with a BMI of at least 27, although baseline body weight was just over 100 kilos and the BMI was over 35. And of course, they had to have type 2 diabetes with a mean HbA1c of 8 or 64 in modern units. The primary outcome was mean percentage change in body weight, and they also looked at secondary outcomes, including lots of cardiometabolic metrics. Just like the New England Journal of Medicine study, those on the active treatment lost a lot more weight than those on placebo. So 9.6% average body weight loss on the highest dose, which is not quite as much as they saw in those with obesity alone. And it's interesting that weight loss is often a little bit less on these types of medications in people who do have type 2 diabetes. All cardiometabolic markers measured showed statistically significant improvements too, including HbA1c. So sure, they may not be losing as much weight, but they're still really good type 2 diabetes medications. Also blood pressure, also cholesterol seem to improve. 1 in 10 people discontinued the drug when taken at its highest dose, compared with 1 in 25 on placebo. And the side effects were in keeping with those that we've seen with other GLP1 agonists. In conclusion, the drug works, although probably not as much as the injectables. It has the same side effect profile, but is easier to take and may well end up being cheaper. This last factor, of course, is what's going to determine its use in the UK, I think. If it comes out cheaper than the injectables, then people will start to use it for sure. You could see a scenario whereby people would use it initially, and then if their weight loss plateaus before their target weight, they might end up titrating up treatment to the injectables, or perhaps they'll start with the injectables and maybe they'll step down to cheaper oral treatments for maintenance in the longer term. All of these are possibilities. If it is much cheaper, of course, it might also change NHS availability as well. But of course, Donald Trump is being all manner of crazy at the moment, and not least for pushing up drug prices around the world rather than addressing the overpricing of drugs in the USA. So who knows how this will all pan out. Okay, on to our third and final paper. This is a lovely bit of clinical work published in the BMJ addressing a practical problem, how we treat scabies. So a dermatologist once told me, via advice and guidance on a patient who just didn't seem to be getting a resolution of his infestation. And I chose to believe the dermatologist with this, that if permethrin is appropriately applied, it is essentially guaranteed to eradicate scabies. The problem is when we move from the ideal to the real world that you and I inhabit in general practice on a day-to-day basis. In the real world, we have no idea what the patient is doing. We may have no control over what they're doing. They may be putting the cream on really badly. They may not be treating the whole family. For all we know, they're just kind of squirting it into their mouth because they've misunderstood what you're meant to do with it. There are clearly plenty of points in the treatment of scabies where this could go wrong. Wouldn't it be easier if you could just give people a tablet of ivermectin and that would sort it all out? So this is exactly what this French study was looking at. This is a randomized controlled trial that recruited adults and children over 15 kilograms with dermoscopy-confirmed scabies. Now, I've never thought of using a dermatoscope to look for scabies before. This is a really interesting idea. Normally, I'm just looking through it at some skin lesion, at some random brown and red blobs with no idea what they actually mean, desperately trying to focus my phone somewhere half reasonable to get an image I can send to dermatology. Seeing a six-legged creepy crawly down the scope would literally be the highlight of my day. Anyway, they recruited just over 1,000 participants across almost 300 households, and about half of them received ivermectin tablets. So the dose was 200 micrograms per kilogram, while the other half were given permethrin 5% cream. Both treatments were used straight away and then repeated 10 days later. The primary outcome was cluster cure. So that's all members of the household were successfully treated and their infestation was eradicated by day 28 of follow-up. So ivermectin cured 72% of households. Permethrin, however, came out top, treating 89%. So a big 17% difference, meaning that ivermectin, surprisingly, given I always thought that it was the top dog of scabies drugs, didn't meet the pre-specified non-inferiority measures. Permethrin actually comes out top. Now, of course, permethrin is already our first-line treatment in the UK, but I've had patients asking me if they couldn't just take ivermectin. The reality is, because of COVID quack inflation and everyone thinking that ivermectin still, somehow, might be a magic cure for COVID, it's still very expensive in the UK. The average adult would need 4 3-milligram tablets, which would cost around £60 to £100. It's a pricey treatment right now. While I was doing my due diligence on this, I actually came across a deworming treatment for horses, which is a 12 milligram dose of ivermectin in an apple flavoured paste for about £8 on the internet. But apparently humans shouldn't consume animal treatments. But it does go some way to show the real cost of this medication. Regardless, we can be very positive about permethrin treatment. It is overall better than tablets. The key, of course, is making sure that it is applied appropriately. And here, actually, I thought it was really obvious. So it normally says on the bottle, don't put it above the neck, whereas I was always told that people should put it everywhere, including the face and the scalp. But I was looking at the Primary Care Dermatological Society website, which has a useful clinical guide on management of scabies, and surprisingly, it recommends, this is a direct quote, the cream should be applied uniformly all over all the body from the neck downwards. Every inch of skin must be covered with special attention paid to skin creases, the genitalia, and underneath the nails. The face and scalp should only be treated if they are affected, which is uncommon in adults and older children. However, the British Association of Dermatologists, or BAD, recommend apply to all areas of the skin, including all over the body, neck, scalp, and face, only avoiding areas around the eyes. The product advice may suggest not treating the face and scalp, but it is best that all these areas are treated. For what it's worth, if I had scabies, I'd be putting that stuff absolutely everywhere. On that delightful note, we are done for the podcast today. Thank you for joining me once again. Don't forget to check out the nbmedical.com website for your next course. You can always get in touch on hot topics at nbmedical.com or via social media. And I hope you have a really good weekend. See you next time. Bye-bye.